You know the best thing about getting a brand new puppy? I can pretend that's what's keeping me up at night and not the Manchester City game. This is the ArsenalVision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot Smith, the Black Man Twitter Gunner. Yeah, that's right. It's not the City game. I'm not worried about that. It's the puppy keeping me up. Maybe a little from column A, a little from column B. We did our Predictatron earlier this week. You can look at those results. The spreadsheet is up. You can listen to those results or you can ignore them. I have an important point to make about those results, which I will make later on in this podcast, just to give you the cold sweats so that I'm not the only one with them. We have a ton of stuff up on the Patreon right now around transfers. We did scouting videos. We did data scouting around those scouting videos. We did a conversation about how to use data versus video and scouting. So it is loaded for bear over there. I also do want to give Phil Costa huge congratulations on the launch of his show. I have to admit, I'm one of these people that's like, I'm glad Phil's getting to do a general football show. Not really for me, because I just consume the Arsenal stuff. I listened. It really is brilliant. Like it's really thoughtfully researched. The interviews are great. The one on PSG was phenomenal. The one on Athletic Bilbao, which I was like, maybe I'll swerve that. I'm not interested. Nah, it's fantastic. Learned about the English roots of the Athletic Club, which is what you call them, not Bilbao, but Athletic Club, from sort of basically English migrant workers that were there, and why it's called Athletic Club instead of Atletico, because of its English roots. And then Nico Williams, who we're in for and should be in for, you can learn about him and his brother. So lots of good stuff over there. You can find it on this feed for now, but you can eventually find it and still currently find it on the Football Vision feed. So that's great. That's all good. Here's what we're going to do this episode. We're going to spend the first 30 minutes talking about England, Belgium, and what we took away from that. And then, can you imagine? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk Manchester City. It's here. And the title of this episode, as you know by now, is Sprint to History. It is, in fact, a sprint to history, starting on Sunday, from the 31st of March, for roughly 6 weeks or so, 7-ish weeks or so. We will be playing every 3 days, and there will be no letting up. And at the end of that 7 weeks, we could be heroes, as they say in the song. We could make history, or we could be chumps. Hopefully not that. But we're going to love each other no matter what. I think, after we're done tearing strips off each other on social media. Your mileage may vary. But here's the beautiful thing. Because it's a big game, we needed a big pod. I don't know the last time we had it, but it is a full boat. All of us are here, meaning all of us will each get about 35 seconds of mic time. And here to do that with me is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Pause My Pants. Hello, Pause. Yeah, no, didn't hear the woohoo.
Keep it short. Keep it quick.
There you go. Okay, woo-hoo. There it is. And Tim, you can find him on Twitter at Stominator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there. Paul briefly turned into one of the three chipmunks there, I think.
He did, just briefly. We're all going to sound like that as we talk about this game more, and our cheeks clench tighter and tighter. And Clive, you can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Hello, indeed. Fresh back from his time on the overlap, where he continues to try to bring, imagine this, thoughtful, reasoned analysis to mainstream punditry. Idiot. Yeah. Okay, so we got a lot to cover here. And I think the first thing we can do is just look at availability and lineups and things like that. And so, Tim, I'll start with you for a second. Obviously, the outrage of the moment is friendly call-ups and things like that. But as it turns out, everybody got injured on international duty. But the injury, I think, is probably in inverted commas. So, we're looking at things like Akanji and Walker and Stones and Foden and Saka. Martinelli actually is carrying an injury. He, I think, is the one that's touch and go. Gabriel limped out. I don't know. With my cynical hat, I think everybody's probably fine. People are talking like Stones does have an adductor injury that could be potentially real. I don't know about any of this. I'm curious, when push comes to shove on Sunday, do you think any of the sort of mooted injuries will keep people from being available to their respective managers to select?
I think you can tell the size of this game because it started already, basically. It started a week ago. It started 10 days ago. It started when Saka and Haaland, Haaland ended up playing, but Gabriel, we got 3 Brazilian internationals. None of them played. And Man City, I think, have developed this new way of getting people out of internationals where they don't pull them out, but they just say, like, go down after 5 minutes kind of thing. So they get the training and everything, and then they start the game, and after 5 minutes, oh no, No, my carp's gone. The only what, like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure all of these players are carrying knocks of some kind. I don't think there's a player in the Premier League who isn't at this stage of the season. And obviously, I think the international managers are being quite sensible at this point and not risking anyone, which, because it's very much, we're at the weighted towards club football part of the season. I expect pretty much everybody to play, maybe John Stones, because John Stones, I'm more inclined to believe he's injured, and that maybe his recovery powers aren't as good as, say, Kyle Walker's, for example. So no, I think this shows you that this game, some games start in the tunnel, some start in the press conferences. This game started 10 days ago, and both managers and both teams want every single edge possible, and I think that's what you're seeing.
Yep, I completely agree. And guys, I have to say, I'm glad Sky Sports has lifted the lid on this. Sky Sports talking about Arsenal and the dark arts and being a little dodgy, and Arsenal maybe taking things too far with having players not get called up or limp out of friendlies, to keep them safe for games, because no club has ever done that before. And, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly weird, especially given that Gary Neville literally just said recently in front of the nation that Alex Ferguson wouldn't even let them go to the March friendlies. He was like, "You're not even going. You literally aren't allowed to go."
I also think Sky are very brave to insinuate that there's something Liverpool didn't invent.
Oh yeah,
I think they'll come to regret that.
I mean, look, let them have celebration and singing. They invented that. Right. But when it comes to limping out, no, Arsenal did. I mean, it's obviously all just ridiculous nonsense. All these clubs are doing it. And really, frankly, it's the right thing for them to do. And I'm glad Arsenal are finally catching on. I think we're late to the party, if anything. Clive, let's just dive into lineup stuff, because I think this is going to be a really fascinating chess match. For years, it was Liverpool versus City in games that really got your blood pumping, even if you weren't invested in the game. They were brilliant games. I am sorry to say, for the neutral, I think the next few years may be Arsenal versus City, and they are going to be cagey, boring, terrible games. That's just what I think we have in store. That's what it was in the game at the Emirates, where I think the XG was 0.4 to 0.45 or something like that. There's very little in this. I don't see this being anything like the game at the Etihad last season, where De Bruyne and Haaland just befuddled our midfield, and obviously Rob Holding with our defensive line height being a mess. Do you have any sort of thoughts that Pep might tweak what we're used to seeing? He tends to like to make a weird selection. Maybe Mikel might follow suit. Someone that's been at Colney, like a Thomas Partey, could come back in, or a player we don't expect, a Urian Timber. Do you expect the unexpected, or do you think it'll be more of what we've seen from both of these clubs over the last few months?
So what's our point to reference, right? So we have 3 games to really focus on. We had last year's game, as you said. We pressed on. They went long. I think they went long over 30 times in the game. And we all know what happened. They played behind Partey, and the gap between Holding, he didn't feel comfortable being aggressive, and we all know what happened. De Bruyne ran through the tulips in that space, and we looked bad. Got slapped in front of the nation. What happened in the Community Shield? We had a different team, Elliot. We had a more physically able team, a more off the ball team. But what I think we learned was the gears by which to play. We slowed down a little bit. We controlled spaces better physically. We had a 6'4" centre forward we could hit and challenge their centre backs. 50-50 game, similar, all XGs below 1. Parties quite similar. But you know what? We edged it on penalties. And more importantly, we edged it mentally, because I think it's important for us not to get beat. Go to a league game, quite similar. Bit of a mid-block game. Bit of a slow progression. So we would play. They would take it off us. They would play. They didn't really have good fullbacks to really go into wide areas. But then we'd get it back. And rather than rush forward and create a counter press, we took our time. We went back. We went around. Went to our goalkeeper. Then he got done. Alvarez went back to our goalkeeper. But we sort of showed a level of maturity. And what happened? We then brought on 3 or 4 substitutes. So Martinelli came on at halftime, transformed the game. First touch. Straight away, we had an edge. Then they brought on Partey, Tomiyasu, and Havertz. And we were able to power up. You know the phrase I use there? Power up off the bench. And then we clipped it over the top, got the goal. It's 0-0 game that turned into a 1-0 because I think we won it off the bench. Right? So I expect something similar to maybe the home game where we're going to have a look at each other. But I think it's going to be a game that comes in phases. Now, Man City, if you watch them recently, and I have done because I was part of research for this, they start very quick, Elliot. They start quick. They want to get into you, but they don't end well. And I said on the overlap this week, if it's 0-0 after 20 minutes, watch out. Because I think we are stronger off the bench again now, just now, to be able to stay in the game, but potentially take the game. You know, so that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. 20-minute chunks, mate. If we're 0-0 there, I will start to think, hold on, if we get the first punch from here on in and make them think about their emotional security at home, no one does that. I think that's going to be the challenge.
Yeah. It's interesting because City can tell themselves a story about the game at the Emirates where they can say, we didn't have De Bruyne, we didn't have Rodri, you know, we're going to have those guys available now. And Arsenal can tell themselves a story, we didn't have Bukayo Saka, you know. In the game where we did have our players and they did have their players, which was the Community Shield, even though we went behind in that game, I think we actually maybe were better in that game against them than we were in the game at the Emirates, which was just so cagey. The thing about the Emirates is to put in perspective how little happened in that game, City had 0 shots on target in 90 minutes. They had 4 shots in the whole game. They had 0 shots in the last 32 minutes. 1 shot after halftime. So little happened. But I do agree that Martinelli changed the feel of that game just enough, and just enough for us to win it critically. And Paul, I think that is the big question around our lineup, because while I expect to see something very similar to what we've seen with Kai Havertz probably starting at 9, and we'll get into this lineup thing in a minute, but the Martinelli of it is important. Martinelli is the one that I think is genuinely struggling for this game. A lot of people have now reported, and I've had it said to me, that Martinelli is not badly hurt, that he's very close, that he could play in this game or he could be on the bench for this game. I just don't think we have a good analog for what he does. Trossard has been a brilliant player and in some ways has contributed more this season than Martinelli in some respects. But he is an interior. It doesn't give us the width. I think that changes the threat that we have. And Pep Guardiola sides have always, I think, been exposable by raw pace up the wings. If you remember a long, long time ago, Pep Guardiola at Barcelona once said the scariest player that Arsenal had was Theo Walcott. And I think Martinelli plays a similar role for us. But the other thing I think Martinelli does critically, he's such a hard worker tracking back, and his sprinting speed recovery can really help, especially if we want to play a guy like Zinchenko, which I don't know if we'll do. But so I don't know that you can, for example, pick a Zinchenko with Trossard protecting that flank as a wide forward. So there's a lot of complexity around how we pivot based on that position. Do you think that Martinelli's presence in this game is something that we don't really have a natural way to overcome? What would your opinion be of what we try to do if Martinelli isn't available?
It's definitely a downgrade any other option we look at, because nobody does what he does, and he's a yin and yang with Saka on the other side, where there's more control, more patience, more of a platform for everybody to get into their spots, and Martinelli's the side where we go at him like the clappers, and as we'll be away from home and they'll have more possession and we may be attacking from deep, Martinelli is the essential component to take you up the pitch. Maybe the fast throw from David Raya. We've seen recently the fast throw to Trossard is not the same as the fast throw to Martinelli, and we've got critical goals from Martinelli sprinting up the pitch. Even against City, the classic game we played around Christmas a couple of years ago, where we got the goal, and it looked like we were on for the game, was I think was Tierney to Martinelli sprinting down that wing, bringing it back in across the face of the box, and Saka coming on to the end of it and scoring. And like, Martinelli's a crucial component away to Liverpool, away to City, away to United, where we've seen him just burst out of kind of a broken play in a midfield, bang it up his wing, and off we go. And so you need both. It's It's just not the same with anybody else. The problem for poor old Trossard who wants to come inside is we don't have the guy who wants to go outside.
Yep.
We had that a bit with Granit Xhaka. He wasn't the perfect player when he got out there, but the dynamic always worked with whoever was coming inside. And now would it be Havertz? Would it be Rice? Those the guys you want pushing off to the left wing so that Trossard can come inside. So it's unfortunate for Trossard we don't have that guy who complements that move inside.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Paul. And Tim, like, if I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm getting even less sleep than I am with the new puppy, because I just think he has so many ways he can go with selection here. It's weird in a way because I think we think the group is very established, but if you think about it, is Rice going to play 8 or is Rice going to play 6, right? Is Kai going to play 8 or is Kai going to play 9? If Martinelli's not available, do you want Trossard to come into 9, which means Havertz moves to the 8, but then who's playing out wide? He has some interesting choices to make, and I think the really difficult one is, in most of the games we have coming up and most of the games we just played, I really like the idea of Jorginho at 6 and Rice at 8, but I'm not sure I like it in this game because I think it potentially allows City to do exactly what they did to us last season at the Etihad. I think their movement and their ability to pick pockets of space between the defense and the midfield is too good. And Jorginho, for all of his reading of the game, which is excellent, and all of his ball progression, which we need against most teams, I think he can be bypassed, and when he can't recover. And so, I think, as we all know, just for anyone who didn't listen to the Predictatron, we all picked a draw in this game. We all picked, let's be honest, pretty Arsenal favorable predictions. And even still, if you turn that draw into a City win, we don't win the title in any of our predictions. So even as rosy as our predictions were, a loss in this game would not give us a title. So while I don't think it is a must win, I do think it is a must not lose. And I think playing Jorginho at 6 gives City the biggest chance to potentially find that one moment of exceptional quality between the defense and the midfield where Haaland can run at our back line and maybe get some joy. So do you think Mikel will pick Rice at 6 to try to protect that pocket of space they exploited so effectively last season in this fixture? And if he does that, then how does he set up the rest of the team in front of him?
No, I expect him to play Jorginho and Rice because they played in the home game and Jorginho was fantastic in that game. I know they didn't have Rodri and De Bruyne, so it was a little bit...
It's a big difference.
It was a little bit, I can't believe it's not Manchester City as opposed to Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, Rico Lewis didn't beat us, but,
yeah. But Jorginho has tended to play in the bigger games, and I think that model will stay in this, and it will probably just almost by necessity get pushed into being a bit more of a double pivot. And I think the thing is then, essentially, if you don't play Jorginho, I think you kind of have to play Zinchenko because Partey's not going to be ready to start this game. So I think we basically always need one of Zinchenko, Jorginho, and Partey. Partey's not going to make it. And
can I just stop you on that? Just, are you sure? Like, Partey's been at Colney, Sober Realty, Colney, whatever.
The sober reality.
The sober. He's been in sober reality for the last couple of weeks, getting healthy. I mean, is there no possibility that Mikel's looking at him and going, you're starting to look like that guy that dominated Manchester City once upon a time? No chance.
No, not for this game. Like, maybe a game coming up. I kind of don't see it. In fact, I don't think Partey will start again this season unless there's an injury in midfield. So I think it will be Jorginho and Rice because that's just been the model. I don't think he'll want to because Zinchenko's defensive weaknesses are probably more significant than Jorginho's. I just don't think. Like, I know Jorginho's not rapid, but I've honestly never really seen that be an issue. I've never just seen people like run past it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just haven't seen that happen. I don't doubt for a second that he wouldn't fare that well in a foot race, but I can't remember the last time I saw him in one because the setup of the rest of the team is so good and Kivior sitting there. I think we should absolutely continue to do that. So I expect those two to start. I expect it to be the same kind of team, to be honest. I expect Havertz up front. It will be Trossard out wide. I completely agree that Martinelli would be a massive miss for this game. The only thing that would balance that out was if it's not Kyle Walker at right back, or in fact, Kyle Walker's maybe one of the only right backs who really, really can match Martinelli, and perhaps having Trossard go inside gives him a different problem, because Kyle Walker's great in a foot race. But then,
it's funny you say that, because in the home fixture, when Martinelli came on, he rinsed Walker to the byline a couple of times, which you don't see very often. Yeah,
and he's going to be playing with a tight hammy, isn't he? If he plays at all, so maybe Trossard gives him a different problem. I don't know, but I'm because you can view it two ways, right? You can just say, let's keep the team as it was. That's been really working for quite a while. Or you can say, well, actually, we've had an international break now. That rhythm's kind of disrupted anyway. So maybe there is room to shuffle the pack somewhere and bring in a Jesus or a Zinchenko or one of those guys who has been at the Sober Reality training complex for the last 2 weeks, really getting their head around, watching video every day, really getting their head around this game, as opposed to someone who's maybe been on international duty. But I think it will be the same, to be honest.
So it's funny, because you mentioned a name there that I was just going to say. Isn't it interesting that 21 minutes into this pod, no one's mentioned the man that changed all our lives and made us dream again in Gabriel Jesus. Incredibly somehow become the forgotten player in the group. And I think if Martinelli is available, I would play Jesus at 9, and I would play Kai at 8, and I would play Rice at 6. I slightly disagree. I do think Jorginho can be exploited, and I do think Manchester City have the quality to do it. He makes up for his lack of pace by reading the game and jumping passes and trying to intercept. But City don't have to get it right 10 times. They have to get it right once, because Haaland won't miss. And if they get it right once, where Rodri finds De Bruyne in between the lines and behind Jorginho, and Jorginho finds Haaland, and it's over. Because this game is going to be a 1-goal game on either side. I cannot see this being a high-scoring game. These two teams just control games too well. The issue, though, Clive, is that we tend to be so aware of our weaknesses, where we can be hurt, and think about things through that lens. I'd play Rice because I don't want him to exploit the space behind, or around Jorginho, or I'd do this to protect this flank. We need Martinelli to protect the fullback, and not think about the weaknesses of the other team, because we tend not to be as familiar with them. But I have to tell you, watching City recently, Liverpool put like 3+ XG on them. Manchester United, who are, let's just be clear about this, one of the worst teams in world football, got in behind City time and time and time again. And that's like a team that's going to finish 8th or 9th doing that. So I think Manchester City look more vulnerable to counterattacks and direct, quick counterattacks than I think we've seen in a long time. That's my assessment of where their vulnerability is. I'm just not sure we're perfectly situated or set up as a team to take advantage of that absent Martinelli. Do you agree that that's the weakness? How would you try to exploit their weakness? And what do you assess it to be, and how would you try to exploit it?
It's a good assessment there. I think City have been showing a bit of leg for a while now defensively, and maybe if Manchester United, they didn't respect them in the same way, and a little bit gung-ho, so Manchester United got in, but they still dealt with them. Where Liverpool, they're a little bit more conservative. But Liverpool, what do? They're quite direct. They go into good running players. They try to keep you there. When you and Tim were talking just then about team selection and what we should do, and Elliot, you came up with a great response around bringing Kai back in. I almost don't think it matters. I think what really matters is we have a way of playing now which could basically force his territorial dominance, spacing front to back. That's why Jorginho's not being run past, because he's not playing. We're not playing like we did at Stamford Bridge away, the big spaces. We're compact, right? So he doesn't get run past. Just got to delay people, show people one way, and get the ball and keep it. I think it's very important for our emotional stability at the back of the end of our team with Kivio and Rice, and I include Rice on that. I think Rice needs a geezer next to him that gives him comfort. I don't want him having the cape on everywhere. If we want to control City in spaces where we want him to be, let him look forward and go and get people to create transitions and disorganized attack. I think it's really important for us to do that, not just sit off and watch them. Watch them play, watch them get comfortable at home, watch them move the ball around, watch them get to their big two up front. Now, we got to go get them. But don't go get them dumb-wise like we did in the home game last year, where we just ran off in a 5 and left Rob Holding and Partey standing there. No, and they were dropping off. Defenders were dropping off. People they weren't joined up. We weren't aligned in our game model, and I criticised it big time because I felt we should have double pivoted it and still stabilised the team because we were rocking at the time, right? So I'm much more comfortable that we have different ways of playing. If Elliot, for example, we win the ball, we want to go back to our goalkeeper. We've seen Ramsdale in a recent game and how uncontrolled the Brentford game was, but we've seen Ryan when he comes in and how controlled we look from the back. How controlled we look. It does make a difference, maybe more than I ever realised. It makes a difference. It controls it. It takes the pace away. It takes the anxiety away. It stops it creating momentums. Exactly the things we spoke about in the last season. We need the ability to create our own momentum and stop momentums against us. And that's exactly what we've fixed. There's a great stat out there about us winning a lot more second ball and regain and things like that. We're a mile away from everybody else. This is what we do now. When the ball's in space, we go get it and we keep it, and we keep it smart and intelligently with patience and composure. So we can do all these things. I'm not sure which skill set we're going to need. Are we going to go long? But we can do it all now. Whereas last year, I thought we could do one thing, which was play our way through the thirds, bigger pitch, out to our wingers, rinse, cut back Jesus, cut back Odegaard. It felt a bit like that, last year. And that's what we could do. Press. So we brought the same game model to City and they picked us off. This year, I don't know what we're going to do, but I know we can do a number of things. City don't know what we're going to do. But I think if I'm City, I'm coming out, I'm doing a Mike Tyson, I'm running across the ring and trying to punch us in the face and see how we feel about that. That's why my first 20 minute scenario is really important. If we can maybe do what we did at Anfield, try and punch them in the face and see how they react.
Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, I said it was over 3 XG. I think it was 2.7 XG that Liverpool had against them. Not the most they've conceded this season, though, because Villa put 2.9 against them in a game where they just never showed up. That was an interesting one you remember at Villa Park where City were just blown away. Paul, how do you see that? I mean, if you're Mikel Arteta, is your priority to try to exploit what you regard maybe as some cracks in the armor that City have displayed in terms of being vulnerable to counterattack, or is your first priority to maintaining the defensive solidity that we've had all season? City have dropped points in 4 games at home this season, all draws, no losses, but they have drawn 4 at home. Defensively, they're a little more stout at home, though, than they are on their travels. Nobody wins at the Etihad, and we don't have to win at the Etihad. I really, really believe that if we draw, we are in position to achieve everything we want this season. If we lose, it's not that it's over. It's that even with the rosy predictions we just did, none of us would have us winning the title, which means things would have to go for us in a way that even Arsenal supporters would not predict. So you're Mikel Arteta. Congratulations on your fabulous wealth and phenomenal hair and just general brilliance.
Thank you.
Are you building your game model around solidity, security, and not giving anything away? Or are you getting that little bit of a tickle you sometimes get at the craps table where you say, I'm gonna put it all on the hard way? Are you gonna try to take advantage of a Manchester City that maybe can be hit on the counter and really go for it and say, if I get 3 points here, we're title favorites? What do you think?
So the first thing is that tactically these games play out differently than I picture them every time. Like when we played City at home and they went long to Haaland, which I could see them doing it a couple of times, but as Clive pointed out, they did it excessively. So these, and the season before that where they did the weird thing with Bernardo Silva, and like each game's quite different to the way it plays out. And I am going to bet that this does not play out the way we picture it. What I'm going to do if I'm Mikel Arteta, now that we are finally, in my mind as coach, basically they're equal, maybe better than them at this moment in time, maybe not better overall, but at this moment in time, there are reasons to think we're every bit their match and a little more in form and a little more sparky. Each game is different, so who knows on the day. But you come into this feeling they're equal for the first time. I think you keep it compact. I think you keep Jorginho and Rice together. That's the key pairing there. And I don't think Rice will stray too far away from Jorginho. I agree with the boys. Jorginho starts, no reason to do it any differently. You just don't have Rice on the pitch as action man. He may be the left 8, but he's not going to be way up the pitch while Jorginho is back. And generally, we've seen that quite often where those two stay quite close to each other. And at times, Jorginho may push up and Rice is the screen, but they'll stay close. They'll be in the same half of the pitch, same area of the pitch. They're not going to be going all over the place. And I think that's where the compactness comes from. And the other thing I want, if I'm, I want Martinelli. And if I'm coach, the other thing I want is Kai Havertz up the top, because that gives us the out ball for those periods in the time in the match that we know will be there where we're under pressure. We have an out ball situation that we've never had before, and a fear against City's back line that they've never had before, where they're going to have to pay a level of respect to him and a knockdown to Martinelli that'll get them in all sorts of trouble if they don't cheat a little bit and cushion it and make sure they got. So I think that buys me a huge amount.
I'll say something that maybe this is controversial. I don't know if it is or not, and I don't know if the data backs me up. I actually kind of think Jesus is more of an outball than Kai. Like, I actually think
one of them 6'4".
But I don't know if Kai is as good as winning first balls as Jesus even. Like, the way he battles for balls, I can't explain how he does it, but he has a way of getting underneath that defender, getting his body into position. Like, let's put it this way. Kai may be a good outball, Paul, but I actually don't think Jesus is any less good, and he might be better. It's certainly close, is what I would say.
So I think there's a survivorship bias factor here where we measure Jesus on the balls he can get to and how well he does with them. But there's a whole bunch of balls he can't get to because he's 5 inches shorter, and we don't measure him on those. We're like, oh, the center back. Like, Kai Havertz is going to get to a bunch of situations, and he doesn't need to be like, his touch has always been a bit loose in my book. His passes, but it's kind of the Kai Havertz thing. Kind of doesn't matter. The ball breaks, somebody else from midfield runs onto it. It's almost like a broken situation. It almost plays for us. So no, there's just no two ways about it. Gabriel Jesus does fantastic for a 5'0", whatever he is. But Kai Havertz is 6'4", and that won't be changing anytime soon. And a sloppy knockdown to Martinelli works as well as a clean knockdown to Martinelli if it's over the top and has him running onto it.
Clive?
I think it's a variation of exits. So I think Kai's better at channel runs, so we can go longer to him. I think he's quicker. I think he's fitter at the moment. We talk about team selections. Let's be honest. If Jesus was fit as we remember him when he first joined, then he's playing, right? And everyone's carrying his bag. Thomas Partey may end this game, but if he was fit, like he was at the start of the season in Community Shield, and like he was at the start of last season, he would be playing. Simple as that. It's where we are right now. And where we are right now, I'm not sure they're ready to start. But with Kai, I'm a huge fan of him as a exit. And more important, I've got recent data in my head. He bullied Konate and Van Dijk. Bullied them to death. Right? And when he plays there, defenders hit the floor. They look disheveled. And I want that. I need that. I don't want everyone coming to me. We lose it and they transition on us. I want us to have the ability to turn them around and stress their backline. Porto's a recent example. First leg, we didn't stress them. Second leg, we stressed them more. What was a big change? Kai played up front in the second leg. I think it's very important we keep that direction.
Yeah, and by the way, I know nobody is expecting to see Alexander Zinchenko start this game, but I think that's sort of interesting. In this run that we've been on where we've been imperious, we've only played one good team, and that's Liverpool. All the other teams are absolutely shit. Newcastle are shit. Sheffield United are shit. Did we play Burnley? I don't know. All the teams we played are shit. Brentford shit. Porto are shit. All of them are shit. Liverpool's the one good team we played, and we blew them away. And we blew them away with Zinchenko starting. And that's the game where you would have said, that's the one where you have to pick for more solidity, more defensive security. And that's precisely what he didn't do. And it was Jorginho and Zinchenko started. And everyone says, well, you can't do that. You got to have someone to cover. Nope, that's what we did. So, Tim, I want to just get your thought on that super quick. Like, We fall in love with the thing that's working in the moment. Oh, Jorginho is working. Kivior is working. And I think sometimes it can obscure us to the fact that the manager may have a pecking order that he's pretty confident in that doesn't necessarily align to what our bias is, our recency bias about how we're playing. And I wonder what you think of that Zinchenko component in particular, because since he's arrived, when he's been fit, he has started by and large for the most part. And Mikel has really shown a lot of trust in him, and I think believes he's an important part of how he plays. So is that one that we as sort of fans, our worries about his vulnerabilities may exceed Mikel's worries based on his track record?
Maybe the fact that he was a sub for Ukraine in such a massive game suggests to me that, you know, he's and he hasn't been playing an awful lot of minutes for Arsenal, and that suggests to me that there are possibly still some concerns. And
we've got fitness concerns, yeah,
exactly. And we've got Luton on Wednesday night, and that's a game he really changed earlier in the season. So I'd be less surprised to see him start that one. For example. So, but I think it's an interesting point you raise, because the only way I see the team really changing is if there's a specific weakness in Man City or a specific part of the game plan that Arteta thinks a player can unlock. You know, if it's a case of, actually, if I play this guy in this position, this really plays it. Like, we think that there's a weakness in Man City here. So he might play Jesus on the left wing, for example, right? Because he might think, I haven't got Martinelli, and actually they look vulnerable in behind, and Trossard's probably not going to punish that in a running race, so I'm going to play Jesus on the left. And I could see that. I could see them doing that, and I don't think that that's, you know, because we see Jesus as a left winger, or we're trying to, that would be to exploit a very specific weakness. And I think we have moved to a stage now where we've got a squad where we're just beginning to be able to do that. And we've seen it in certain types of away games this season, where Everton, Fabio Vieira started in midfield, Forest, Emile Smith-Rowe started, Brentford, Trossard started in midfield. Like, all of those teams, you know, 10 behind the ball, 7'8" defenders, and so we wanted a creative player there. Like, I do think we are beginning to move to a stage where we can go a bit horses for courses. So, and don't forget, in the lockdown season, we played Willian as a false nine away at City. Not suggesting that that's a good idea, and it's not one that's available to us anyway. But, you know, sometimes in these games, the fact we started Havertz in the Community Shield when we didn't have to at that point, particularly, that suggests that they thought, no, Havertz up front, that can really do something to Man City here. So there might be something up his sleeve that when we see the team sheets at 3:30 on Sunday afternoon, we go, oh, why is it? I didn't expect that. Why is he playing? And we probably won't find out until about 20 minutes into the game, and we see what the kind of the game plan is.
Yeah, not to mention that a lot of these fitness concerns that we're rubbishing as just managing the international break, like, they could be fitness concerns. And that throws this whole conversation into disarray. The other thing I think we have to be aware of, like, this is a really hard thing for a manager. We regard this as a must not lose game. You got to play guys if they're on the borderline. But what if they're on the borderline and you lose them and they're out for 4 weeks? That lights your season on fire. Because 4 weeks is freaking 12 games for us right now. You know what I mean? So it is the weird reality of this moment that the City game must be the priority, and it is a must not lose. And by the same token, you must not flame your rest of your season chasing this game by playing. Like, if Bukayo Saka is 20% fit, you cannot risk him, because you still have to face Bayern twice, and you still have 400 games in the other couple of days. I think Mikel really has some tricky decisions to make. And of course, Pep does too. And the one thing we know about Pep is, if any one of these managers is going to do something you just absolutely cannot believe he did or did not see coming for a big game, he's going to do it. I mean, what was it? Bernardo Silva at left back. He tried it out there against us and that didn't work. He changed it. But like, he is willing to try crazy stuff in games that have all the stakes riding on them. Paul, you had something you wanted to add?
I think there's only one tough decision for Mikel Arteta to make, because everything else is just a choice, whether it's Jesus or Havertz, assuming everybody's fit enough. You know, the tough one might be, well, if Martinelli's fit, he plays. If he isn't, that one's easy. There's only one tough decision for him. If I'm him, I desperately don't want Kivior at left back. Not because he hasn't been good, It's because this is a level of game that Kivior has not been asked to perform in. And if I'm Pep Guardiola, I'm thinking, give me Kivior at left back, please. Please, God. Give me that guy on toast for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to look to hit them. And if he can find a fit enough Tomiyasu, he might, if he thinks like Zinchenko gives him a similar risk in that area, but it gives us more of an upside, like that's the one. I think every other position, Mikel's in good shape, and it's really about what he feels like and what he'd like, how he'd like to. That's the one position he's like, you've done great, Jakob, and look, I'm going to play you plenty down the stretch, but this is one where I need you on the bench, and we're going to play Tomiyasu, or like I'm just desperately trying to come up with a way to not have Kivior be the area that Pep's looking to hit for 90 minutes.
I think that's right. It won't be Tomiyasu.
He's been good.
Yeah, it won't be Tomiyasu. I mean, I think that's very clear. He just hasn't played enough football, and I don't think you can rely on his fitness. And I think the worst case scenario is you start Tomiyasu, and 20 minutes later he's got to come off, and you're changing everything. I think it'll be Zinchenko. I do agree with you, Paul, though, that as great as Kivior has been, we haven't really seen him on the rack in a game. I mean, it was Zinchenko that started the Liverpool game, and since then we haven't played a real football team. So, I mean, I don't want to say that Kivior hasn't done brilliantly. He's done brilliantly. He is a hero very, very of this season. And if this season comes to fruition the way we hope, he will be one of its heroes. But at the absolute top level of the game in the Premier League, we haven't really seen him yet. We have seen Zinchenko, and for all the dismissal people want to give of him, when we were title contending last season, and in the biggest game of this season at home anyway, it's been Zinchenko. So, Clive, what's your sort of response to that? I think you feel slightly differently.
No, I think he's fantastic from Paul, really, and I know what he's doing there. He's concerned, right? But then we watched Tomiyasu. Well, we didn't watch because it's only behind closed doors. Who played half a game in against QPR. So that's our frame of reference there. But we have a track record with him, so we have a comfort factor, right? So, and similar to Thomas Partey, our frame of reference is a couple of weeks ago when he couldn't pass more than 3 yards, right? We don't know what he's done in the last 2 weeks. And then there isn't really the option. Zinchenko, he didn't start a massive game where he came on and captured. I think he came on the 74th minute. So that tells you he's not quite ready yet either. So I would go Kivior because I have a fit working player into our back four unit. But also, Elliot, it really does make me think Jorginho needs to play, because where does Rice stand? He stands in that left-hand side mostly. He does move around. But I felt Kivior's improvement has come with Jorginho's addition, because Jorginho recognises his stress on the ball and takes it off of him, creates a passing angle, and then he can be a delay, physical defender that protects on set pieces and adds to our set pieces. So I do think he's become more comfortable with the Jorginho addition and, let's be honest, with Ben White's inversion. And so the role has changed. So he's not a left back as we probably remember a little bit as what he was against Fulham, for example. But I do think Paul raises a great point. And I'm not saying he's wrong. I think that's actually a really good point. And it's a risk factor going into this game. But I don't think it's as big as it was maybe at Christmas.
And I want to make sure we're clear about something here. No one is knocking Kivior. That's not the point. But we've played City at home, Liverpool home and away. Those are the three hardest fixtures we played in the Premier League. And they're the only fixtures I regard in the Premier League this season as really at our level. Everybody else is a step down. Not saying they're easy games, but they're a step down. And all three of those games, a draw at Anfield, Zinchenko started. A win against Liverpool at home, Zinchenko started. A win against City at home, Zinchenko started. So whatever we think of the vulnerability that we believe he poses and that Kivior solves, in the three biggest games of the season where we have won 2 and drawn 1 and lost none, he started all three of them. This is not me doing a full-throated defense of Zinchenko, who has also had flaws this season, and it is not me criticizing Kivior. But I do think it is interesting that on the biggest stages we played in the Premier League this season, Mikel has gone with the guy he believes in, and I just think we dismissed that at our peril. And we got to back the guys that get out there. And I think there is a fear in the fan base about Zinchenko. There's this perception of him as a liability. But I do think it is worth restating that in the 3 biggest games of our season in domestic competition, he's started all 3 and we haven't lost any of them. Clive, last thought on that?
Last thought. We do have something called substitutes, mate. You know, honestly.
That's the topic I want to get to next, so we are going to cover it, I promise.
We do have something called substitutes, and I do think they're all going to play a role in this game.
Well, yeah, and because to your point, like, while I think Zinchenko might start, what all of us would agree on is he shouldn't play 90 minutes. That's not who he is. So if Zinchenko starts, Kiwior is going to play. He's just going to play at the 70, 75-minute mark, right? I mean, and you just hope Mikel finds the right moment to get Zinchenko off before he does a Zinchenko, which is a late game error. So, you know, that's part of it. We do want to talk subs. I do want to get, not predictions so much, but a couple of matchup questions. And I want to talk a little bit about the bigger picture of where this leaves us. But it would be remiss of me to do that when we are so stressed without telling you in this stressful moment that this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy, it's therapy. That's it, it's therapy. I was talking to my mom about this the other day. You know, I said, Mom, you should do BetterHelp. She's like, oh, you think something's wrong with me? My mom's 82. She's like, no. I said, no. You know what? Like, you've done therapy in your life. It's been helpful for you. You've moved to a new place. She's moved to be closer to us here in Minnesota. She doesn't have a therapist here. She doesn't live near anyone. And my mom at 82 is no longer driving. And so a thing that she's done her whole life that like really added value for her to just feel healthier, she doesn't have access to. And, you know, I think like a lot of people's like, oh, is that really therapy? She's like, yeah, it's really therapy. And I think it sort of opened her eyes to the possibility that she can have access to something that maybe she thought was not going to be a part of her life anymore. That's always been a helpful part of her life. So I think we should really acknowledge that, you know, for people who who are differently abled in some way in terms of their ability to access therapy, BetterHelp can be great. But if you're someone who just says, I don't want to have to find an hour to drive there and drive back, I don't have the you know, maybe the expense is too much, or there's not someone that fits my needs, or I don't feel as comfortable, I'm shy about it, I'd rather have my camera off. BetterHelp gives you the ability to do that. I think therapy is important. I think you should do it. You can certainly try it, you know, and see if it makes, you know, finding your happy place a little easier for you. God knows over the next 6 weeks, we're all going to need to find ways to find our happy place. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. And new to the podcast is Unified, UNIFYD. We're trying to keep you people healthy during this spell. This is a tough spell and we need to stay healthy. So whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, which let's underscore this is not a world-class athlete, mental well-being, physical well-being, proper recovery for top-notch performance, all important. And Unified are healing centers, innovative global network of wellness centers powered by a new system designed by a PhD doctor, energy enhancement system. They just call it the EE system, promotes relaxation, wellness, purification, rejuvenation. There's lots of testimonials on their website. There's lots of more information about this that I will not bore you with, but there are hundreds of locations around the globe, and access to a center is easy and affordable. So if you're interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself, go to unifiedhealing.com/ArsenalVision. That's unified, UNIFYD healing.com. Anyone who's ever tried to buy a URL knows why you have to wind up spelling things a little weirdly like that, right? To learn more and find a center near you, unifiedhealing.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now live. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay, Tim, Clive mentioned it, so I will immediately turn it over to you. The thing that I think is an edge for Arsenal, and it's so interesting, isn't it weird how football can change? Manchester City for so long, the way they stomped on the league was they had the best 11 players, and then they had the best 8 players sitting on the bench, 7 players sitting on the bench. As it turns out now, that may not really be the case anymore when it's guys like Matthias Nunez and Kovacic and Rico Lewis and Oscar Bob sitting on the bench and a few injuries, and all of a sudden, Pep looks down that bench and he doesn't have the likes of Gabriel Jesus, who for so long was that security blanket in big games. But we may have guys like Jesus on the bench and Trossard on the bench potentially, and Thomas Partey on the bench, or Tomiyasu or Kiwior or Zinchenko, right? Guys who can really add something. Let's not, dismiss players like Nelson and Nketiah. There are good players that are going to be sitting there on the bench available to Mikel. And I'm wondering if you think, strangely, and for the first time in a long time, that bench and those options may decide the game and may tilt in Arsenal's favor.
Yeah, I mean, Clive mentioned it about the previous game at the Emirates, where that kind of proved to be the case. Yeah, absolutely. Really, the kind of, if we were doing the Manchester City Vision podcast and we were talking about, with our three listeners, then got to get the cheap shots in now. So, like, and again, this is clearly not diminishing the size of this task. I would bite your hand off for a draw right now. I'm terrified about this game, like everyone else is. And the last time we won there, 2005, January 2015. Nearly 10. Like, we don't.
So you're
win
saying
this.
it's time, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Law of averages. If we just ignore the fact that the law of averages isn't actually a thing that exists in the world, but yeah, if we were looking at Man City's lineup, I mean, obviously they've got fitness doubts and things like that. Really, the only area of their team at the moment that does kind of change week to week is whether Jeremy Doku plays or not, or rather the extent to which he plays. Does he get the first 60 or the last 30? Like, Doku is their kind of their plug-in guy at the moment because Grealish isn't fit. And I do kind of trust the reporting that he hasn't trained, hasn't been in full training at all during this international break, and they've not really been playing him anyway. He seems to have gone kind of back to square one at Man City. So, they essentially they kind of got three wingers and they play with two of them. But the rest of their team kind of picks itself, really. Again, they've probably got like six good defenders at the moment, 4 positions, and that's right. Like Rico Lewis and Oscar Bob, I think are going to be really, really good players for them. But at this stage, this is like quite a big game, and we're not a joke anymore. We're not a pushover. And yeah, I think that I hate saying this before the game because it's going to be so easily clipped up if we lose 4-1. But I did a tweet like over Christmas after the game against Liverpool at Anfield where I kind of said, remember those Liverpool City games? Like, that's us now. And the unfortunate thing for me is I had to delete that tweet because we went on to lose the next 3 games and it kept popping up in my Twitter mentions after the final whistle of every single one with 200 additional retweets. And I don't think they were from Arsenal fans. So I ended up having to get rid of that tweet because of the timing of it. But I think time has borne me out. I'm absolutely certain that City fans will be nervous about this game. Maybe less nervous than us. I don't know. They're at home. They've kind of been here a lot more than we have, but I'm sure they're not going to be relishing this game either. I'll be honest, the last time we went there last season, I predicted we'd lose 4-1. I think everyone in the ground knew it was going to be 4-1 and that our one goal would be exactly what it was, which was a completely meaningless consolation when City can't be bothered anymore because they've got bigger fish to fry in Champions League semi-finals and stuff. I don't think this game's going to be like that. I really don't. I really don't think Manchester City think that this game's going to be like that either. And yeah, I think to your point, yeah, our bench is looking pretty good at the moment. Like guys like Smith Rowe, Nelson, Nketiah can't really get a kick. Like Fabio Vieira, that layer of the squad is pretty strong, and those are the guys that probably aren't going to kick a ball in this game. So I think really it's about, for Arsenal, optimising that and having a pre-game strategy for that. I'm sure they will. But I'm sure there will be a suite of substitution options that will say, if the game's like this, at this score on 65 minutes, we're going to do this, this and this. And, to move the chess pieces around the board a little bit. We've got good shutdown players, if that's what we need. We've got good power-up players, if that's what we need. I wrote about this a little bit today about how, like, the squad, other than, I think, Fabio Vieira, has settled into these kind of quite nice tiers, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think that gives Arsenal a lot of adaptability. And we've got players that are adaptable as well. So if Declan Rice is playing as an 8, we can chop him back to 6, no problem. If Havertz is playing up front and we need a bit more, we're chasing a goal, we can drop him back into midfield and put a forward on. So having really adaptable players on the pitch as well is a really, really big boon for us as well. That's how we won the Brentford game. Havertz started up front, we're chasing a goal, Let's drop him back into midfield, bring Jesus on, and then who pops up with the winning goal? It's Havertz from midfield. So we've got options with our existing players as well to kind of shuffle the pieces around the board a little bit.
Yeah, Clive, you want to come back on that?
Well, not so much come back on it. I'm just nodding in massive agreement because it's what I've always wanted. It's what I've always wanted. I've always wanted a team like this. I wanted a team that was physical, that was adaptable. I don't like little fullbacks, if I'm honest with you. Right? You know me long enough. There's no point in telling you something that's not me. I like to have people that can manage their space, manage their area, interior players, ingenuity in those spaces, absolutely small space players, up for that, pace in wide areas, killer pace, having the ability to change that pace is really important for next season for me. I'd like to see an evolution at left back, if I'm honest with you, a wing back style player, which could then do things with our forward line. I like this team, how it's developing. I like its mentality. I like its off-the-ball seriousness and emphasis to get the ball back. I like his territorial dominance. When you have territorial dominance, what are you doing? You're playing someone else's half. When you're playing someone else's half, what's going to happen? You're going to get more set pieces. What do our coaches do? Develop more set pieces and make us a set piece monster team. It's not just about pressing, it's about what the byproduct of pressing, what's the byproduct of where you play, and how you maximize that. I'm loving what this team is doing. And I don't know, we could lose this game, but if we lose this game, it's going to be a moment. But I don't think it's going to be a tactical moment like City pulled in us last year. And if they go long, well, cheers, because that's exactly what we want. We're literally playing for that in our game model. We'll take it and we'll come back at you. So they're going to have to keep it. When they keep it, they're going into wide areas and they're not sprinty out wide apart from Doku. He's still a kid. When he came on in the home game, Ben White just murdered him, mate. He's still a kid. But Paul's done me today because Paul spoke about the left-back position. And Doku plays right wing for Belgium a lot. And I watched him this week and he wasn't bad on that right wing side. So now, Paul, I've got enough things to stay awake about, but now you've added a left-back situation defensively, and Doku could end up playing on that side. And that's the one thing I could see.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it's going to be managed. But hey, look. Cheers, Paul. Thanks a lot, mate.
Paul, I don't want to shut you out of this because I think the tactical battle as the game wears on is going to be fascinating, and who flinches first. Pep Guardiola's move, by the way, in big games, you guys, is to just not make subs at all. That's a pretty common thing for him, is to not bring anybody on. And I think Mikel is more in that mold than the Klopp mold of just trusting the next 3, 4, 5 guys and throwing them on. So I think it will be tweaks, if anything, as the game goes on, and it'll certainly depend on game state. But I sort of think both of these managers would take a handshake draw right now. I'm not saying that's how the game will play out, but I don't think either team's going to show their knickers, so to speak. I don't think this is going to be a Liverpool City game. I think this is going to be an Arsenal City game. Very tactical, chess match, 7 shots for City, 6 shots for Arsenal kind of game. And I think both managers, if you said it's going to be a bore 0-0 with no major incidents, they'd take it. I think they'd take it and say we'll play out the rest of the season and see who can go beat up the rest of the league. And it'd be harder for Arsenal because of the fixtures we have. But I think it would be a good position for us to be in. Paul, do you see it any differently than that?
I think that's probably right. If we drew away at the Etihad, we'd have beaten them and drawn against them in the league. That's pretty fucking good.
And Liverpool as well. So we'd have
and Liverpool.
taken 4 points from both of our direct rivals, which is a big upgrade on what we did last season, obviously.
Yeah, and Gary Neville's got the whole, if you want to win the league, you got to go there. And if you look across this season, we'd have beaten and drawn against the top 2 teams in the league. And absolutely matched them in those games. I think we were superior to Liverpool, at least as good and superior in every game so far. The subs thing is really interesting. I think you're right. I think there's a good chance Pep stays with what he has unless it's just not working. But Mikel, I think, I don't think he's going to stay with the same team for 90 minutes. We're away from home. We're going to have different requirements in different stages of the game. I think he'll definitely use the power of our. Why would you not use the power of your bench when you got a superior bench? I think you use them. Pep might be wanting to roll the dice on keeping the guys on the pitch, but if Arteta can't find something that gives the opposition a problem after 70 minutes when he's got such good options on the bench, I think that's a big miss. So I think it's at least going to be a factor for us. It's going to be really tight. Moments, as Clive said. I just think Havertz gives you so much in terms of even if we're not dominant, he gives you those moments. At any moment, that ball out to him, the legs. He gives us the Liverpool option of throwing legs at the problem. Him, Martinelli, Saka streaking at you, Rice charging up the pitch from where we were sitting in a little deeper. I think that gives you something that City is scared of all game long. Running into the channels, as Clive talked about. He's got the knockdowns, but he's got that run in behind the centre backs. Like, I love Gabriel Jesus, but Jesus drops deeper. Havertz runs in behind into the channels. There's a whole other fucking problem for Man City away from home to have Havertz there. I think he's going to scare them in a way that Gabriel Jesus won't in this kind of a game. You do not want Havertz streaking up the pitch, knocking it right to. He's a generous attacker, so he's not going to go for goal every time. He's seen his XG numbers. He knows the right thing to do is to pass to Saka, and he frequently will. So,
yeah, there's a player we haven't mentioned at all in this pod that I do want to touch on, but I will just bring this up for a second too, for anybody that's really panicking like myself. These are Manchester City's results against the top 5 teams in the league currently. A 1-1 draw at Anfield, a 1-0 loss at Villa Park where they were blown off the pitch, a 3-3 draw with Spurs at the Etihad, a 1-1 draw with Liverpool at the Etihad, and a 1-0 loss at the Emirates. They've not won any of them. And at home, they've drawn twice, once to Spurs, once to Liverpool. So, again, past performance is not a predictor of future return, but I'd be curious to see just how aggressive they are in trying to win this game. Be very, very interesting. A very different game than the reverse fixture. Tim, there's a player we haven't mentioned, and I think he may be the player who's the X factor in this game, and that's Martin Odegaard. Martin Odegaard is not just our captain. I think he has been our best player since the new year. Bukayo Saka would like a word. Declan Rice would like a word. Kai Havertz would like a word. Saliba and Gabriel would like a word. They've all been brilliant. But I think Odegaard has gone to a totally new level. And I think it's happened a little under the radar because of who we've been playing against largely during that period. And the fact that our Champions League tie was sort of a non-event because the ball was hardly in play and it was just a gross 2 legs of football. I think Martin Odegaard has a chance on a stage that will be our biggest global stage of the season to really showcase what we've been seeing for a while now. Kevin De Bruyne is the guy that everybody expects to pull the strings and make the magic happen, and he frequently does, and he still can. Let's make no mistake. But I think Martin Odegaard will push himself to do more in this game because as a captain, I know it means a lot to him, but also this is the stage for him to show what he's been doing a little bit, I think, under the radar over the last few months. I have him as the key factor. When Martin Odegaard doesn't get on the ball and doesn't influence games, I do think we struggle. But when he is on the ball, when he influences games, he makes the magic happen. And I think nothing highlights that point more than the Trossard goal against Porto, where Odegaard just said, F this, and turned 4 defenders to stone and, made it happen himself. Now, again, full credit to Trossard for finishing it. But do you think there's a chance that Martin Odegaard could be the player who announces, not that he needs to announce himself. I mean, at this point, if you don't know how good he is, that's your fault. But you know what I mean? Like, just announces himself in sort of an heir apparent to De Bruyne kind of way, and in a way of saying, I'm here now. I'm the midfield maestro of the Premier League now. I think he could be the X factor for us.
Yeah, definitely. I know exactly what you mean. We all know how good he is, but Arsenal are in this weird thing at the moment where nobody is interested until you put a trophy on the table. And then once you do, it goes completely the other way and everyone worships the ground you walk on. And I think in the past there have been some fair decent Arsenal players who've been like exalted because they were part of title-winning teams.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if they'd been in teams like 5-10 years later, I don't think they would have really lifted the level. That's just life. Odegaard, I think you're right. I think he has been our best player recently. I'd even if you took out the Porto home game, I think he'd have an argument. That Porto home game, to me, that sets him apart because he was the one who really, really turned up. I'm not accusing others of not turning up, but you know what I mean? Like the other guys you mentioned there, Declan Rice, tricky night against Porto. Saka against Wendell, tricky night, tricky two legs. Odegaard was the one. Odegaard was the one who, not just in that goal contribution, but over the whole game. And another one of the reasons he's so rare, it's so rare to have a player creatively that good who is in no way peripheral. Quite the opposite. Even De Bruyne, and again, obviously, like De Bruyne has probably been the best player in the world over the last 5 years or so. So, please don't say I'm knocking him, but I don't see De Bruyne pressing and cajoling. Like there's still an air of cerebralness about him, which, don't get me wrong, lots of great creative players have. Like Bergkamp had that. You don't see me for 60 minutes, but then I win you the game. Odegaard's so rare because he is involved in every phase of the game, every moment. So he doesn't need necessarily, one of the reasons we really value him as well is because it goes beyond his end product numbers, which are still very good, by the way. Last season, 15 goals and how many assists? He was getting towards 30 goal contributions in the Premier League, extraordinary numbers. But even if he doesn't come out with an assist or a goal, he contributes in a massive way with his off-the-ball effort. Not just his effort, but he leads that effort. He's not just part of it; he starts it. And I really think that part of his game, I understand why that's kind of underrated more widely at the moment. I get that. You kind of have to watch Arsenal every single second of every single game to see it because that's the kind of player he is. But I'm with you. Listen, if we win this game, I don't care how we win it, and I don't care how much we deserve to win it. But if you let me choose a way to win this game, I'd love Odegaard to walk off with man of the match, maybe the winning goal or something like that, so that it finally feels like that ascension. It feels like Saka's got that. To me, it feels like everyone knows how good Saka is. Everyone knows how good Declan Rice is. They have a more obvious, I think, kind of greatness to the way that they play. But I think you're right. I think Odegaard's the one who perhaps more widely doesn't quite have the credit that he deserves.
Yep.
And let me tell you, if he really performs in this run-in and a game like this, he might be picking up more than the man of the match trophy. Obviously, we want the big team trophy and all of that, but he might be cradling another individual trophy in his Sunday best, in his tux, at a nice big dinner at the end of May with the football writers or the PFA or whatnot. He would very, very much be in that conversation as the best player in the league this season. I really hope he does it.
Yeah, I really do too. By the way, quirks of the fixture list, I think this is where we look. Nothing is easy about the fixtures between now and the middle of May, but I think we did get lucky in one respect. When we beat City in the Community Shield, the next weekend the season started and we were below our best against Forest. One of our less good performances, we got past them. When we beat City at home, the very next weekend, we had our worst performance of the season, in my view. The performance at Chelsea, where we got that 2-2 draw. One of our worst of the season, certainly. When we went to Anfield and got the draw, the next two games were the West Ham and Fulham losses. We've not bounced back particularly well from those big league fixtures. But we play City at the Etihad, then Luton at home. And Luton at home should be one of, and I'm not dismissing it, nothing like that, but I will say that's one of those fixtures where maybe you can rotate, maybe you can get through it without the level of intensity you normally bring to those games. City have Villa at the Etihad right after us. And I do think that's just a slight little edge, especially looking at how we've dipped following our games against City previously this season and our game at Anfield. Obviously, our home game against Liverpool, we then went and smacked West Ham 6-0 afterwards. So not all data points support my conclusion, as usual. Clive, there is another battle, positional battle, that is tedious and annoying, but I just want to touch on it before we get out of here, which is Foden and Saka. Saka didn't play in the reverse fixture. Foden might as well not have played. He was absent for 90 minutes. But now this Foden and Saka narrative is a thing. It's in the national conversation, the global conversation. I'm wondering if you think that those players will feel that pressure and excitement to go head to head with each other. And if, it's a chance for Saka or maybe Foden to say, I just want to get an edge up on my England counterpart. They're talking about us like we're similar. Do you think the personal pride angle and the competitiveness of that sort of 1v1 situation might impact their performance or have an impact on who shows up in this fixture?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we on this Arsenal podcast are aware and see Phil Foden correctly. I mean, when I did the old overlap thing this week, one of the questions was, do you think Phil Foden is the most talented English player ever? And I sort of my chin hit the floor. I thought to myself, well, I just watched the Brazil game and I couldn't find him with a torch in that game, right? And
he's not the most talented English player on between these two teams or in the England setup right now. He may not be in the top 4 most talented English players between these two teams.
But guys, the fact that question was out there tells me, I started to think, do I need to clean my glasses a bit better? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not always seeing it. I think he lacks presence. However, in the second game against Brazil, when he was allowed to float, I think we saw the player that we do see for City on some occasions. But come on, I mean, let's not get to that level. So I'm not sure if we're the best people to really capture his talent, much like you would talk about Martin Odegaard. Not everyone sees him like we do. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's
I'll just stop you for a second to say this. I rate Foden. I think he's a phenomenal player. Okay. This is not me not rating Foden. Like, I'd take a Phil Foden at Arsenal tomorrow. I think he is one of the more talented players in the league at present. But first of all, in the England conversation, Saka's beyond him for me. Rice is beyond him for me. I
Bellingham?
think you could maybe Bellingham's the obvious one. I can't believe I didn't even think of that. Just goes to show you how Premier League centric I am. Maybe you want to throw Ben White in there. Maybe you want to throw Kyle Walker in there. You certainly want to throw Harry Maguire in there. I'm kidding. But my point is, I rate Foden. I just think that kind of evaluation of him is wide of the mark. That's all.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying earlier. We all rate Foden, and we're not dumb. We can see he can trap it and move it and kick it in the net. He's got 4 or 5 league championship medals in his back pocket and a Champions League. He's done a bit. He has done a bit. He hasn't always been central, but he's done a bit in his career and achieved things. But I do think Saka's got to a place now where his consistency has become boring. He is a goal contribution machine. And to see England play without his physicality and positional discipline that Saka offers, it was obvious to me we missed him. And, Saka's massive stock rising for not playing these 2 England games. Absolutely. And now the Foden's flipping over to the left, mate. Otherwise, you're not playing. So yeah. Hey, look, he said, she said. We know the player that we have. He is delivering on a week-to-week basis. For him now, and this is the thing that I think we need to get into our heads, we have some very good players in our team that are contracted. They are contracted to win things together. Not to just take our money, to win things together. And Martin Odegaard played that Porto game like he's decided we're going through. And he just decided it. And we need more of that. There's no point in getting on and everyone connecting and everyone getting on together. And then when it comes to the crunch moments, you disappear out your own arse. This is the moment to really stand up and say, yeah, we like each other. So let's play like these games really matter. We've learned from the experiences going in previous years. I think that's the message for me in the next 10 games. Because 10 games in the last season weren't so good. Draws in there, losses in there. I think 4 wins in that last 10 games. So we need to fix that situation really quickly. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I've ended in a place that I feel in team talk mode that we need to, this is the moment now to really show what we've got.
Okay, so to that point, Paul, we know a win will lift us. I think a draw would lift us too. I think it leaves us in fine shape. Is there any scenario where you see a loss leading to what Clive referenced from last season, a sort of wheels come off scenario? How like if I said to you, okay, we all know a win is the best outcome, a draw is an acceptable outcome. How damaging is a loss in this game? Is it avoid at all costs, probably shift focus to Champions League, league is gone kind of thing if we lose? Is it there's still plenty of football and you keep your head up? Do you see the wheels coming off? Like, I don't want to say, like, look, none of us want to think about losing this game, but it is one of the three possible outcomes. So if that outcome were to come to fruition, how do you see it impacting our season vis-a-vis just the league and the general mood and the Champions League and us surviving as human beings through the end of May?
So it depends on how you lose. It's 3 points either way, but like if we just get taken to the cleaners, if we look like clearly the second best team on the pitch, then yeah, you've lost your 3 points, has punctured your balloon. You walk away from there thinking, you know what? We're not as good as we thought we were. We are not a match for those guys. So now you're behind them. You've lost the points. You got a mountain to climb, and you don't believe. But if we are their equal and their match, and we get robbed, or there's a deflection late in the game, kind of how we got our goal against them, or whatever it is, and you're just unlucky, that's a whole other scenario. Now you need the others to make a mistake, and we're all assuming City will go to the line without making any mistakes. Liverpool look like they're going to win every game, but teams are going to get tired. The idea that 3 teams are going to be perfect from the City game onwards till the end of the season, it's not going to happen. So they're both in European competitions, and Liverpool's playing on a Thursday, and Man City has its hands full potentially playing Real Madrid and then hopefully us, or at least Bayern in the next round. So no, it's obviously not over. But psychologically, if we match them on the day, then yeah, we're in it till the end. If we win it, I don't think it means we win the league. If we draw it, I don't think it means anything especially in terms of the outcome. Apart from we're very, very much in it for real and everybody should take us seriously. We've also had the advantage of not being in the hot seat with the spotlight. And as long as we play well and keep it close, then yeah, we're in it. But obviously the percentages are a lot better if we get that draw or if we can sneak the win.
Yeah. I'm nervous. I'm so nervous.
Isn't this great though? Why?
No.
Like, it's good. No, this is great. I'm sorry. If you're only here for when, I don't mean it in the trophy horse sense, but if you're only here for the wins, it's such a long road. It's all kind of worry and misery. Like, this is fucking it, guys. We've got to the point where we're as good as Man City. We're going to their place. We know we can get a result. Will we get it on the day? We don't know. We're in it for the champion. Like, this is it. This is what it's all about. Enjoy this kind of nervousness. This is fucking great. I'm sorry. It can't just be about did we or didn't. Binary. We won. Everything's great. We won the league. We lost. Oh my God. Like I have the nerves too. Don't get me wrong. But this is fucking great, guys.
Intellectually, I agree with you.
No.
I'm just saying emotionally, I'm a wreck. That's all I'm saying. You can't make me not be a wreck. You can't talk me out of it. It's just where I'm at.
Somebody that's actually watched the game with you, he is a wreck when he watches the game.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's not good.
I watched the game with him, and he mostly talked about Cedric, which was amazing.
To be fair, I think that was the last game of the season with nothing on the line, and I don't think I was alone in that. I think Andrew and I had long conversations.
Yeah, well, that was the problem. You and Andrew were sitting beside each other, beside me, and Cedric had a stormer.
He scored a goal.
An assist.
We're convinced it was a cross. Tim, last thought here, and then we'll say goodbye. These big moments are the thing you want to be a part of, and then when they come, they're so agonizing. But we're here. We're on this stage, a second season in a row where we have a trip to the Etihad with the nation, the world watching to see if we have what it takes to be champions. I tend to agree with Paul in all cases, but in this case in particular, that the one outcome we cannot have is one where we don't look at the level, right? I mean, you can lose this game. This is the hardest fixture in world football right now. Make no mistake. This is the hardest fixture in world football. You are going away to the treble holders, right? That's the hardest fixture in world football until it isn't. And so for me, the only thing that we cannot do is not look like we belong on that stage. I don't expect to see that happen. But the good thing about how many fixtures we have is there will be no time to over celebrate or cry in your mug or whatever you want to say, because like we'll be playing again on Wednesday. So I think that's a good thing. But do you agree that the key thing here is just to show up at the level we've established as our level? Football has a lot of vagaries and anything can happen. But if we show up and play to the level that we've been displaying most of this season, then the chips can fall where they may. And whatever the outcome, I'll still feel good about what we can go and accomplish this season. Is that about right?
That's absolutely 100%. Yeah. Look,
Thank you.
The reality is we're going to win the league. Yeah, we definitely, look, maybe it might fall a different way this season, but if we're talking about being in this title race again and again, this is just going to be like the old days when it was us and Man United, right? Like those games come up, they just do, and you've got to deal with them and you've got to do well. And like, you can't, if you always lose them, you won't win anything. It's that simple. It might be nip and tuck. It can be back and forth, exactly like it was between us and United. We blooded each other's noses in that time. Look, we landed one on City in October. No reason we can't go and do that again. Look, again, law of averages. We had a 1-1 draw and a penalty shootout win in the Community Shield. We had a narrow 1-0 win. That's how these games have gone, and we've done really, really well to get them to that scenario, because that's not what they were like last season, albeit I think City got to play bad Arsenal twice last season, and I still, sorry to any royalists listening, but I'm still convinced the death of Queen Elizabeth II screwed our season because we should have played Man City at our absolute zenith of our form when they had some doubts, and that could have made a big, big difference. I think you're right. I think but we have to look like we belong on this stage. And as for, nerves, of course we're all feeling like that. But, what Paul says is absolutely right. Like, it's a bit like winning cups, which we have done recently. If you want to win a cup, you've got to sit through the hell of a cup final. And they are hell. They are not enjoyable unless you do what we did to Aston Villa and bop them 4-0, which almost never happens in finals. So, yeah, you got to go through hell to get to heaven, guys. And this is going to be hell, really. But what lays on the other side of it could be amazing. And I think, I guess, as a final thought, like, what's really interesting about this for me as well is Liverpool fans watching this. Like, what are Liverpool fans going to be thinking? What do they want to happen? A bit like when Liverpool played City the other week. Like, how do you feel? Who do you want to win, kind of thing? And I think for all the kind of online bravado, I don't think they're going to write us off entirely. I think it'd be entirely justified for them to be more scared of City than us, given history, but I don't think that they're dismissing us whatsoever. So it's on us to show that that's correct, that this is a three-way thing now, and particularly for next season, Liverpool losing Klopp, etc., etc. This is a chance to lay a marker down for next season as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Liverpool play Brighton on Sunday, and no one's talking about it, but that game is before our game. The three-way dynamic is a really strange one. But enough about my marriage. Kidding. I think we can leave it on that high note.
Your wife, and
whoever
puppies?
She meets,
and this podcast.
That's exactly right. Yeah, this podcast feels very much a part of my life in all phases. We will have an instant reaction live at full time video that you can watch, and you can get your comments in, and we do interactivity. And then, of course, if you're not into that sort of thing, the audio comes out about 45 minutes after full time, and hopefully it is a celebratory mood, but whatever mood it is, we'll go through it together as we always do, and then we'll have a main pod after the weekend. So we'll leave it there, expecting to have something for patrons tomorrow as well. That should be fun, but wanted to get this out a little early so you have time to celebrate the build up and feel as nervous as I do. But also that means we don't have the manager's comments yet. So that might change some of the analysis as well. We'll see what happens. Big moment. It is a sprint to history. And I just think it's crazy. You're going to blink and it's going to be gone. And we're either going to be title, we're either going to have a double or a title or a Champions League or nothing. And it's all going to be lost and all going to be rediscovered along the way. And the journey is going to feel a lot like a roller coaster. And I'm very excited to go on that ride with the three of you and with everybody listening and with Arsenal fans everywhere. And hopefully it ends in a celebration. So we will leave it at that. Clive's on Twitter, Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter, Stillmanator. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Paul's on Twitter, Pause My Pants. Thanks, Paul.
Woohoo!
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yank and Gunner. And please, God, how great would this be? We love you. And we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10. City, no.